Hello friends, welcome to episode 2 of my new ongoing series on shrimp keeping basics. In the last episode, we looked at tanks and tank sizes and why that is or isn't important. And in this episode, I want to look at substrates and decorations, including rocks and wood and such likes. Now, if you're new here, my name is Richard, and I'm the author of the Neocaridina Shrimp Handbook. I'm also a fish and shrimp keeper who's been in the hobby for well over 30 years. So I don't think anybody will deny that substrate and decorations are an incredibly important part of any shrimp tank as far as us shrimp keepers are concerned. The question we ask ourselves is, do we actually need a substrate? And if we do, what's the best substrate to go for? Now, as I mentioned in the last video, this series is specifically about members of the Neocaridina shrimp family. That's your red cherry shrimp, your black rose shrimp, your blue diamond shrimp, your yellow shrimp, your orange realies, whatever it might be. What we're not talking about here is your caridina shrimp, your bee shrimp and your crystal shrimp, etc. With those shrimp, the substrate plays literally an active part in the management of the water and of the water parameters for that tank. And that is not my area of expertise. If you are looking to keep crystal shrimp or bee shrimp, then I would suggest you check out channels like Mark's Shrimp Tank or Shrimp Mania or some others that I'll put down in the description below. So here we're going to talk about substrate and decorations for your Neocaridina shrimp. So question 1, do we actually need a substrate? Well, as far as the shrimp are concerned, essentially, they don't care. Shrimp will do almost just as well in a bare bottom tank as they will in one with substrate. But having a substrate does bring a number of things to the party that a bare bottom tank just can't compete with. The first of these is, in my opinion, aesthetics. That you cannot compare the look of a tank set up with a good substrate, some rocks, some plants, etc. You cannot compare that to a bare-bottomed glass aquarium with almost nothing in it. Now, of course, this may well depend on why you have your tank set up in the first place. If you're a commercial shrimp breeder, then maybe bare-bottom tanks are the way for you. But if, like me, you want to enjoy your shrimp, you want to interact with your shrimp, you want to see your shrimp doing what they do in an almost natural environment, because there's not much natural about these tanks, let's be honest, then I think substrate is essential. Now, it's not just the aesthetics. Substrate also provides an almost infinite amount of surface area compared to a bare bottom tank. A bare bottom tank, which is 12 inches by 12 inches, clearly has about 144 square inches of surface area. When you compare that to the same, but with a layer of gravel or sand or fluvial stratum, the amount of surface area is phenomenally more. And surface area provides somewhere for beneficial bacteria to grow, which can only benefit the quality of your shrimp water, but also for biofilm to develop, for algae to develop, for microscopic crustaceans that the shrimp like to feed on. They will all develop, they will all grow on the surface of the substrate. So having a substrate basically increases your potential for beneficial bacteria and biofilm exponentially. It really does make a difference. So not only does it look good having a substrate, but it also helps provide an environment which is far more conducive to the successful development of your shrimp colony. So if we agree that a substrate is a good thing in your shrimp tank, the next question surely has to be, well, which substrate should I go for? And there are many different choices here. In fact, there are far too many to cover in this video. But I would say the most common substrates used for your Neocaridina shrimp, they're going to be gravel or sand. You might have crushed coral, sea chem fluorite or fluvial stratum, or as I say, there are many different brands available, but essentially they're a mix of one of those types of substrate. And again, each of those substrates comes with its own pros and cons. And in my tanks here, I've pretty much got all of those with the exception of crushed coral, and I'll tell you why not in a minute, but I've essentially got all of those substrates in this shrimp room. And I have to be honest, they pretty much all do equally as well. But as I say, they have their pros and their cons. Now let's start by looking at gravel. Gravel is typically incredibly cheap and it does look relatively natural. Now you do tend to get the larger bits of gravel, and I use those down here with my neon blue crayfish, and you do tend to get much finer gravel, which tends to be a little bit more expensive, but can look a bit more aesthetically pleasing. Here in the UK, we often refer to that as grit, and we can buy it at local garden centres as such like, as well as at fish stores. Now that does tend to look really natural and provide a great base for bacteria to grow on, and if you want to grow plants typically grow really well in the gravel. And in my experience, better in the finer gravel than the really big chunky coarse stuff, but either works just as well. And one of the real benefits of gravel is it's super cheap and it lasts forever. I mean, unless you're doing something weird in your shrimp tanks, gravel doesn't tend to break down. It doesn't tend to disintegrate over time. It should last you damn near forever. Gravel is also really easy to keep clean. We call it gravel vacuum because you literally vacuum the gravel, it moves up into the pipe, the dirt comes out, the gravel drops back down. It's really easy to maintain. Now, I'm not a big fan of gravel vacuum, but if I do it on the occasions I do it, it is super easy, or certainly much easier with gravel than perhaps it is with sand or fluval stratum, etc. So gravel is probably the cheapest option of the substrates and is easy to maintain and does look relatively natural. So after gravel, your next choice is probably sand. And sand can be cheap if you go for play sand or pool filter sand, or it can be more expensive if you go for dedicated aquarium sands like those made by Carib Sea. Come in lots of different varieties, different colors, slightly different textures, etc. But essentially, sand is really cheap to buy, and again, much like the gravel, it doesn't tend to break down over time. Now, sand does have its downsides. Often plants don't grow as well in sand as they do in gravel or stratum or something like that. But whilst you will hear people on the internet say you can't grow plants in sand, you can. They just typically, some plants don't do as well as others. So you just choose your plants wisely, and sand works fabulously as far as I'm concerned. I'm using sand up here in what was my yellow Neocaridina shrimp tank. And as you can see, the plants are doing really well up there. So the sand itself doesn't prevent you from growing plants. So with gravel and sand considered, let's take a look at crushed coral. Now, crushed coral tends to end up somewhere between gravel and sand. It literally, as the name suggests, it's coral, which is dead and has been crushed up. And crushed coral is fabulous if you live in somewhere, if in your home you have acidic water with a low pH with few dissolved minerals. Adding crushed coral can bring up the pH, can increase the levels of dissolved minerals in your water, making it much more suitable for Neocaridina shrimp. I'm fortunate, my tap water comes out with a pH of about 7.4, 7.6, and we have lots of dissolved minerals. That's why I choose to keep Neocaridina shrimp. If I had super soft water with almost no dissolved minerals, I would still want to keep some Neocaridina shrimp, so I would add crushed coral to that water, and that would raise the pH. It would literally dissolve in the water slowly over time and increase the amount of minerals in the water, making the water much more suitable to Neocaridina shrimp. So next on my list of substrates that are great for your Neocaridina shrimp is fluval stratum. Now, I love using fluval stratum. The reason I love using it is not actually anything to do with the shrimp, it's because plants grow so well in it. I've got fluval stratum in a number of these tanks, and it's literally been designed with growing plants in mind. The roots just pass through so easily. And in my experience at least, any planted tank with fluval stratum just does so well. Now, unfortunately, on the downside, fluval stratum can be relatively expensive. Compared to a bag of sand or a bag of gravel, fluval stratum, certainly here in the UK, works out considerably more expensive. And even in a relatively small tank, like a 20 gallon or a 29 gallon, you may well need more than one bag, and the cost can really start to add up. Another downside of fluval stratum is if you're into the gravel vacuum, it doesn't tend to do well. It tends to break down as the individual particles bang against one another. They do quickly break down. And if you gravel vac on a regular basis with fluval stratum, you will essentially destroy your substrate. It essentially doesn't matter what substrate you go for, providing you understand, is that substrate going to interfere with my water chemistry, or is it going to be inert? Typically, sand, gravel, fluorite, stratum, they're inert. They don't really interact with your water chemistry. If you go for something like crushed coral, or you choose an active substrate, substrates that are high in humus, substrates that break down over time and interact with your water parameters, then you need to understand that before you use those substrates. And that is typically why people who keep the Caridina shrimp, the bee shrimp, that is why they like an active substrate, because those substrates help lower the pH of the water and make that water more acidic and more conducive to bee shrimp, to crystal shrimp, etc. But before you go out and buy yourself some active substrates, I really recommend doing the research and make sure you understand what those substrates do, especially in the first few weeks. If you watch any videos by Leon from Shrimp Mania, you will know he leaves his tanks weeks and weeks and weeks before he adds any shrimp to allow all the ammonia to leach out of that substrate before he adds the shrimp. If you set up a new tank, fill it with an active substrate and put your shrimp or fish in straight away, you will lose them. The amount of ammonia typically released by those substrates is high, and that will prove fatal to your shrimp. So before you go for an active substrate, make sure you know what you're buying and how you work with it. So with substrates covered, let's have a look at decorations. Now by decorations, in this case, I'm talking about rocks and wood and whatever else you might buy from your local fish store that goes into your shrimp tank. Now, providing anything you buy has been designated shrimp safe, you can do anything you want. If you want a sunken pirate ship or a SpongeBob pineapple house in your shrimp tank, go for it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Does it look natural? No. Is there anything natural about any of these tanks? No. So you do whatever you want to do. Just make sure whatever you buy is designated fish or shrimp safe. Now rocks, much like gravel, you essentially get two types of rock. You get inert rocks that won't interact with your water chemistry at all, or you get whatever the opposite of inert rocks is, that may well interfere with your water chemistry. If you've got acidic water and you put a lump of limestone in there, that will slowly dissolve and interfere with your water parameters. If you put a lump of granite or lava rock or something into your aquarium, then it doesn't interact with your water at all. It doesn't affect your pH or your water chemistry. So providing you know what rocks you're putting into your aquarium, the shrimp literally won't care. Now, much like with the substrate, the more surface area you provide, the more space there is for beneficial bacteria and biofilm, and especially algae, to grow. Now, I know in our hobby, algae is a bad word. You've got algae, oh, you're failing, you're doing a bad job. The reality is, shrimp love to spend their day picking at algae. They will eat the starts of algae, they'll eat the biofilm on the algae, they'll eat the microscopic life that is growing in that algae. I don't know if it comes across on camera, but you'll notice some of these tanks, they need maintenance, they need the glass wiping. And as I've said many times, first of all, I'm not in a hurry to wipe the glass because algae is only beneficial. And secondly, I only tend to clean the front viewing panel. I don't mind algae on the sides and the back, and I don't mind algae growing on the rocks or the wood, because algae is only beneficial to your shrimp tank. The more rock we have, the more wood we have, the more places, the more space there is for algae to grow. And as far as I'm concerned, that's only a good thing. Now, when it comes to wood in the aquarium, you do need to make sure you get aquarium safe wood. There are dozens of types of different wood available. In fact, I'll overlay a list of some of the most common types of aquarium wood you can source. But no matter what wood you choose to go for, I cannot recommend enough that you buy it from a local aquarium store or from someone who is prepared to put their hand up and say, this wood is aquarium safe. Because if you're not careful, if you just put some random wood in your aquarium, first of all, it may well float, because we all know wood likes to float. And secondly, it could have a pest or a pathogen or something, or it may well break down and destroy your water quality and harm your shrimp. So whilst I'm all for using what you have in your local environment, I'm not really a big fan of just going out and harvesting wood and shoving it in a fish tank. Now, one thing shrimp do love is if you ever put some spider wood in your aquarium, that typically very quickly grows an unsightly white fungus. And let me tell you, the shrimp absolutely love to chow down on that fungus. I don't know what the technical name is for that fungus. I don't know if it's a fungus or an algae or what it is, but let me assure you, you put some spider wood into your aquarium and allow that fungus to develop, your shrimp will go gangbuster for it. And as I mentioned before, no matter what decoration you go for, rocks, wood, pirate ships, SpongeBob castles, little chests that open up when the bubbles blow, just make sure they're designed for aquariums and state fish or shrimp safe on the packaging. If you just put some painted ornament in your aquarium, the chances are the paint may well start to dissolve or flake off, and it could contain toxic chemicals. So decorations are a completely personal choice, just make sure they're safe. I think the one takeaway from this video has to be how you set up your aquarium, what substrate you choose, what rocks or wood or other decorations you choose is a totally personal choice, and always go with what works for you. Don't worry about everyone else is doing. If you like it, go for it. And the next thing we really need to discuss is filtration and lighting. And we'll do that in this video here. And if you haven't seen the first video in the series, I'll put a link to the whole playlist just here. Thanks for watching.